Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are completely flipping the script on how we think about global progress. For decades, we've all been sold this story that poverty is something you solve from the top down. But today, we're diving into the missing chapter. We're going to trace the journey of communities actually taking back their economic agency and rewriting their own futures. Think about it for a second. What if the absolute biggest mistake in global development isn't a lack of money, but a lack of control? The traditional assumption is pretty straightforward, right? It says development is just about throwing funding at a problem from the very top. You've got international institutions, foreign aid groups, and global experts sitting in conference rooms thousands of miles away, trying to design solutions for rural farmers they've never even met. And yet, despite billions of dollars and incredibly good intentions, so many regions remain completely stuck. So what if the real solution doesn't actually come from above, but from within?
Let's start by unpacking part one, the top-down failure.
Picture a local community desperately waiting for a lifeline. Now, the traditional top-down model assumes a super linear path. External experts design a brilliant solution, national governments roll it out, and then boom, the people magically benefit. But reality? Reality usually breaks down at literally every step of that chain. Why? Because true development isn't just about drafting up a clever policy on paper. It's really about who makes the decisions, who holds the purse strings, and who actually shapes the day-to-day system. When there is a massive distance between the decision makers and the communities they're supposed to help, it doesn't just create inefficiency, it leads to outright systemic failure. So if that doesn't work, what does? That brings us to part two, shifting to bottom up. Bottom-up development completely flips the traditional dynamic. Instead of relying on external charity dropped out of the sky, solutions are built organically from the ground up. The community actually takes the wheel. They identify their own specific needs. They design the solutions that make sense for their culture, and crucially, they control the implementation. Now, this doesn't mean totally shutting out the rest of the world or rejecting global support. Not at all. It simply means recentering the control. The foundational principle here is totally rock solid. The people who are closest to a problem are always the best positioned to solve it. Which leads us to part three, testing what actually works. We are seeing a massive, super exciting shift toward rigorous, evidence-based approaches. Instead of just rolling out a program because it sounds nice in theory, modern organizations are acting like scientists. Groups like the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab are using randomized controlled trials. They are essentially running global development programs like strict science experiments. They ask measurable questions. Do school meals actually boost attendance? Do microloans truly help a local small business expand? They test the idea, they meticulously measure the outcomes, and they compare the results against a control group. Effective development is discovered through actual experimentation, not just assumed through ideology. And when you start stress testing these long-held assumptions, you get some wildly surprising results. Take cash transfers, for example. Organizations like GiveDirectly have piloted a radically simple approach. Instead of giving aid in the form of specific mandated goods or complex programs, you literally just give cash directly to the people who need it. You trust them to know what they need. It is the ultimate proof of trusting people with their own economic agency. Now, when people receive direct cash, there's often this outdated kind of paternalistic fear that they're just going to waste it or become hopelessly dependent. But the hard evidence proves the exact opposite. People make highly productive, completely rational investments. They spend that cash on securing food for their families, paying for school fees, buying essential tools for their small businesses, and putting roofs over their heads. They don't waste it, they build with it. When everyday people control their own resources, they make the absolute best decisions for their own lives. It's all about agency, not dependency. Let's zoom out a bit for part four, building local value. For any community's journey toward true independence, they absolutely have to make the leap from basic extraction to actual value creation. Historically, so many developing nations have been totally stuck at the very beginning of the global supply chain, just exporting raw, unrefined materials. But real, lasting development requires capturing that value locally. That means taking those raw materials, processing them at home, turning them into finished goods, and building local brands before anything gets exported. You simply don't get wealthy by providing the raw ingredients for the rest of the world to cook with. You build a strong economy by making the final product yourself. Let's look at Ethiopia as a really concrete example of a nation successfully making this exact leap. Ethiopia recognized that to move up the global value chain, they couldn't just keep exporting raw cotton. So what did they do? They invested heavily in local textile manufacturing. They built specialized industrial parks. By processing those materials themselves, they retained that massive economic value locally. They created thousands of new jobs, and they permanently shifted their position in the global market. Development requires capturing value locally, and this is exactly what that looks like in the real world.
But here's the best part. Countries don't even have to rely solely on distant overseas markets to succeed. Regional integration is an incredibly powerful path forward. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a brilliant example of this strategy in action. It's a huge initiative designed to build robust regional trade networks, share critical infrastructure, and develop local, neighboring supply chains. By trading with your neighbors rather than just shipping everything across oceans, communities insulate themselves from massive global power imbalances, and they keep that wealth multiplying right at home.
Of course, none of this operates in a vacuum. That brings us to part 5, systems that support people.
Listen, even the absolute best, most innovative community-driven ideas are going to fail if the broader system cannot support them. Local solutions only translate into lasting nationwide outcomes when local institutions actually have their back. That means you need transparent governance, true rock-solid accountability to citizens, and public systems that are highly responsive. Bottom-up development isn't just a bunch of isolated feel-good local projects. It's about building an institutional architecture that genuinely listens to the people it serves. Institutions are the vital engine that translates a local decision into a permanent reality. I really want this next point to sink in. The fundamental issue here is not a lack of effort from developing nations, and it's definitely not a lack of brilliant ideas. It is simply a lack of control over decisions and resources.
Which leads us perfectly into part 6, the ultimate solution, which is control. When you really boil it down, every single problem we've analyzed across this series is ultimately a battle over who holds control. When we talk about resource extraction, we are really talking about who controls the raw materials. When we look at global trade, it's about who controls the value chains. National debt, that is control imposed through financial constraints. And when we look internally at politics, it's about whether a few elites control the power or if the citizens do. Every major challenge is, at its core, a control deficit, which means every lasting solution has to be about shifting that control back to the foundation.
This absolutely shatters our traditional definition of progress. Development is not some neat little package delivered by elites at global summits. It is certainly not an act of charity handed down from above. True development is an architecture built locally, brick, by the very people who live there. It happens when people control their own economic path. Real progress is built, never imposed.
The future of global development is not going to be sketched out in a fancy boardroom thousands of miles away. It's happening right now in local communities, driven by small businesses and supported by institutions that actually serve their citizens. We need to permanently shift our mindset. We've got to stop asking how much aid is being given today and start asking the much deeper structural question: who actually controls the path to development?
Which leaves us with this final defining thought. Until control shifts to the people closest to the problem, development will remain incomplete. This isn't just about tweaking a few policies, it is a massive systemic shift. When you empower the foundation, the entire structure rises.
If this explainer sparked some light bulbs for you today, you've absolutely got to check out the full ebook linked right down below. As we close this out, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to chew on. In your own community, who truly holds the control over your economic future? Keep questioning the structure, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.